The screaming metal of my re-entry pod tearing through Earth's atmosphere should have been music to my ears. Instead, it sounded like a death knell. 500 years. 5 centuries of drifting in the cold void while my ship's automated systems kept me alive in suspended animation. The mission to deflect asteroid designation XK-739 had gone catastrophically wrong when my propulsion system malfunctioned during the intercept maneuver. I'd failed. Humanity was supposed to be extinct. The pod's emergency systems jarred me fully awake as we broke through the cloud layer. My muscles screamed in protest after half a millennium of disuse, but the cocktail of stimulants flooding my system forced my body into action. Through the porthole, I could see the surface rushing up to meet me. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Where sprawling cities should have been, I saw twisted spires of black metal reaching toward the sky like gnarled fingers. The landscape below pulsed with an organic, rhythmic movement that made my stomach lurch. This wasn't the dead world I'd expected to find. This was something far worse. The impact threw me against my restraints hard enough to taste blood. Emergency foam expanded around me as the pod's hull groaned and settled into what felt like soft, yielding earth. The silence that followed was deafening. No birdsong, no wind, just an oppressive quiet that made my ears ring. I triggered the emergency release and felt the pod's door hiss open. The air that rushed in was thick and humid, carrying a stench that combined rotting vegetation with something metallic and sharp. It burned my lungs with each breath, but it was breathable, barely. Stumbling out onto the surface, I found myself in what had once been Central Park. The familiar landmarks were gone, replaced by towering structures that looked like they'd been grown rather than built. The trees were still there, but they'd been twisted into unnatural shapes, their bark blackened and weeping some kind of viscous fluid. That's when I heard them, a clicking, chittering sound that raised every hair on my neck. The sound was getting closer. I spun around and saw them emerging from the shadows between the twisted trees. At first glance, they looked almost human from the waist up, but their torsos were mounted on 4 insectoid legs that moved with mechanical precision. Their skin was a mottled gray-green, and their eyes were compound, reflecting the dim light like black mirrors. The Centaurus, though I wouldn't learn their name until later. 3 of them approached in formation, their movements coordinated and predatory. The lead creature raised what looked like a weapon, a twisted amalgamation of organic and mechanical parts that hummed with malevolent energy. I couldn't understand the clicking sounds they made, but their intent was clear. I dove behind the wreckage of my pod, just as the first energy bolt seared the air where I'd been standing. The metal hull glowed white-hot where it struck, and I could feel the heat through the debris. My hand found the emergency plasma cutter from my toolkit. Not much of a weapon, but it was all I had. The chittering grew louder, more aggressive. They were communicating, coordinating their attack. I could hear their legs tapping against the ground as they moved to surround me. This was it. 500 years of drifting through space, only to die within minutes of returning home. The distinctive crack of human gunfire shattered the air. One of the Centaurus let out a shriek that sounded like tearing metal before collapsing, its legs twitching spasmodically. The other 2 spun toward the source of the attack, their weapons charging with that same ominous hum. "This way! Move!" The voice was human, female, and carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed in life-or-death situations. I didn't hesitate. Sprinting from cover, I saw them, a small group of humans emerging from what looked like a camouflaged bunker built into the base of one of the twisted trees. They were armed with modified weapons that looked like they'd been cobbled together from salvaged parts, but they moved with military precision. The woman who'd shouted was in her 30s, with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too much. She laid down covering fire while 2 men flanked the remaining Centaurus. The creatures were fast, but the humans were faster, and they knew the terrain. "Dr. Zoe Kim, what's left of the North American resistance," she said, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward their position. "You picked a hell of a time to drop in." The battle was over in seconds. The Centaurus were dead, their alien blood pooling on the corrupted earth. But I could hear more of them in the distance, their chittering calls echoing through the park. The gunfire had attracted attention. "We need to move," said one of the men, a grizzled veteran with scars crisscrossing his face. "The patrol drones will be here in minutes." Dr. Kim nodded and turned to me. I don't know who you are or how you got here, but unless you want to end up in one of their breeding facilities, you'll come with us. Questions later. They led me through a maze of concealed passages and hidden tunnels that ran beneath the park. The walls were lined with some kind of bioluminescent material that cast everything in an eerie blue-green glow. As we moved deeper underground, I began to see evidence of human habitation, sleeping areas carved into the walls, stockpiles of supplies and weapons that looked like they'd been scavenged from a dozen different sources. "Welcome to New Eden," Dr. Mitchell said with bitter irony. "Population, whoever hasn't been harvested yet." We emerged into a larger cavern that had been converted into a makeshift command center. Screens cobbled together from salvaged electronics showed surveillance feeds from the surface. Around them, maybe 30 people worked at various tasks, maintaining weapons, monitoring communications, and tending to the injured. An elderly man with a white beard approached us, his eyes widening when he saw me. "Dr. Kim, who is this?" "His clothing. It's not from any settlement I know." "That's what we're going to find out," she replied, then turned to me. "Name, mission, how did you get here?" I took a deep breath, trying to process everything I'd seen. "Commander Tony Kendrick, United Earth Defense Force. I was part of the asteroid deflection mission. XK-739. My ship malfunctioned during the intercept. I've been in suspended animation for..." I paused, the enormity of it hitting me again. 500 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the elderly man stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Show me your identification." I reached into my suit and pulled out my mission tags. He examined them carefully, his face growing pale. "Zoe," he whispered, "look at the date." Dr. Kim took the tags, her expression shifting from suspicion to shock. "This is impossible. These are from the original mission, the one that was supposed to save us." "What happened?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer would be worse than I'd imagined. The old man, Elder Kale, they called him, sat down heavily on a makeshift crate. "The asteroid you were sent to deflect, it wasn't an asteroid. It was their ship, the Centaurus mothership. When it reached Earth, they didn't destroy us. They enslaved us." My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor. No, that's not possible. "Our scans showed..." "Your scans showed what they wanted you to see," Dr. Kim interrupted. "They'd been studying us for decades, maybe centuries. They knew we'd send someone. They were waiting." Elder Colette leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But there were those who knew, those who prepared." The old text spoke of a guardian who would come from the stars when humanity's darkest hour arrived. A guardian who would carry the keys to our salvation. I looked around the cavern at the faces staring at me, dirty, worn, but suddenly filled with something I hadn't seen since my arrival. Hope. "What are you saying?" I asked. Dr. Kim holstered her weapon and knelt beside me. "We've been waiting for you, Commander Kendrick. For 500 years, we've been waiting." The weight of their expectations crashed down on me like a physical blow. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of Centaurus patrol drones searching for us, their alien technology humming through the Earth itself. Below, 30 pairs of human eyes looked at me like I was their last hope. Maybe I was. Elder Collet stood slowly, his weathered hands reaching for something hidden beneath his robes. "Your ship, Commander. Does it still function?" "The core systems..." "Yes, but I don't understand what..." "Then it's time you learned about the bunker protocols, about what our ancestors hid beneath Colorado Springs, about the weapons they left for the day when the Guardian would return." He pulled out a device I didn't recognize, clearly alien in origin, but modified with human technology. "This is a Centaurus access key. We've been trying to decode it for decades, but according to the old texts, only someone with the proper authorization codes could activate it." I stared at the device, my mind racing. Authorization codes? What kind of authorization codes? Dr. Kim smiled grimly, the kind that would be programmed into the computer systems of an Earth Defense Force deep space vessel, the kind that would have been on your ship. The implications hit me like a physical blow. My mission hadn't been a failure. It had been the first step in a plan that had been centuries in the making. But that meant... How many people knew? I asked. Elder Calay's expression darkened. Enough. But not enough to prevent what came after. The Centaurus didn't just enslave our bodies, Commander. They harvested our minds, our memories, our knowledge. They've been building something with what they took from us, something that will make their conquest of other worlds inevitable. The sound of approaching drones grew louder. Dr. Kim stood and began issuing orders to her team. Pack it up. We move to Shelter 7, now. As the humans around me began their practiced evacuation routine, I struggled to process what I'd learned. Earth wasn't dead. It was worse. It was a farm. And somehow, I was supposed to be the key to changing that. But first, we had to survive the night. The last thing I heard before the evacuation alarms began was Elder Calay's voice, barely audible over the chaos. The prophecy spoke of sacrifice. Commander, I hope you're prepared for what's coming. As we fled deeper into the tunnels, the weight of 500 years of human suffering pressed down on me. Behind us, the chittering of the Centaurus grew closer, and ahead lay an uncertain darkness that might hold humanity's last hope. I was no longer just a failed astronaut. I was something far more dangerous and far more important. I was humanity's last guardian, and the real war was just beginning. The evacuation through the tunnel system took us 3 miles beneath the surface, through passages that had been carved by hand over decades. My lungs burned from the stale air, and my legs, still weak from 5 centuries of suspended animation, screamed with each step. But the alternative was capture by the Centaurus, and after what Dr. Kim had told me about their breeding facilities, I pushed through the pain. We emerged into Shelter 7 just as the first light of dawn began filtering through concealed ventilation shafts. This facility was larger than the previous one, carved into what had once been a subway station. The platform had been converted into a makeshift medical bay, while the tunnel entrances had been sealed with salvaged metal and alien technology. "Home sweet home," Dr. Kim muttered, pulling off her tactical vest and wincing as she revealed a fresh wound on her shoulder, at least until they find us again. I looked around at the 30-odd survivors who called this place home. Children huddled against adults, their eyes holding the kind of hollowness that only came from growing up in a world where every day was a struggle to survive. The adults weren't much better, scarred, malnourished, and carrying weapons that looked like they'd been cobbled together from whatever they could find. "How many settlements are there?" I asked. Elder Colette settled onto a bench made from scavenged materials. "Maybe a dozen across North America. Used to be more, but the Centaurus have been systematically hunting us down. They capture some, kill others, and harvest the rest for their experiments." "What kind of experiments?" Dr. Kim's expression darkened. "They're trying to understand human consciousness, our creativity, our ability to improvise, things their species lacks. They've been extracting memories, neural patterns, trying to replicate what makes us human." The implications hit me like a physical blow. They're not just enslaving humanity, they're trying to become us. "While keeping us as livestock," Elder Colette confirmed. "The perfect combination of our ingenuity with their technology. Once they crack the code, they'll be unstoppable." A young woman approached our group, her military bearing still evident despite her ragged appearance. "Dr. Kim, we've got movement on the surface sensors. 3 Centaurus scouts, moving in a search pattern." "Thank you, Riley. Keep monitoring and let me know if they get within 2 blocks. "Doctor," Kim turned back to me. "Commander Kendrick, we need to talk about your ship. Where did you land?" "Central Park. The pod's probably still there, but the ship itself is in a deteriorating orbit. The automated systems will bring it down in maybe 18 hours. Can you control where it lands?" I nodded, pulling out my emergency communicator. The device had been designed to maintain contact with the ship even after extended periods in suspended animation. "I can adjust the landing coordinates. But why?" "Because," Elder Colette interrupted, "we need to get to Colorado Springs. The bunker protocols I mentioned. They're housed in a facility called Deep Iron. It's been sealed for 500 years, waiting for someone with the proper authorization." "What exactly is in this bunker?" Dr. Kim smiled grimly. "Everything the Earth Defense Force couldn't deploy before the Centaurus arrived. Weapons, vehicles, communication networks. An entire military infrastructure that was hidden away for the day when we'd need it most. The weight of their expectations was crushing. You're talking about starting a war with an alien species that's had 500 years to establish themselves on Earth. We're talking about finishing a war that started the day you launched, Elder Calais corrected. The question is, are you ready to complete your mission? Before I could answer, an explosion rocked the shelter. Dust rained from the ceiling as the emergency lighting flickered. The young woman, Riley, came running back. "They've found us! Centaurus ground forces, at least a dozen. They're breaching the north entrance." The shelter erupted into organized chaos. Dr. Kim began barking orders while civilians grabbed emergency packs and weapons. The sound of energy weapons discharging echoed through the tunnels, followed by the distinctive chittering of Centaurus warriors. "There's an emergency exit through the old maintenance tunnels," Dr. Kim shouted over the noise. "But someone needs to stay behind to seal the blast doors." "I'll do it," I said, but she grabbed my arm. "No. We need you alive. You're the only one who can access that bunker." She looked around at her team. "Riley, take the commander and 12 others through the maintenance exit. Get to the surface and rendezvous at Safe House Delta." "What about you?" "Elder Calais and I will hold them off and trigger the collapse charges. This shelter is compromised anyway." The sound of battle was getting closer. I could hear human voices shouting, the whine of energy weapons, and the distinctive sound of Centaurus legs clicking against concrete. Through the smoke, I saw flashes of movement, the gray-green skin of the aliens as they advanced through the tunnels. "We don't have time to argue," Dr. Kim said, pressing the alien access device into my hands. "Get to Colorado Springs, find Deep Iron, and for God's sake, don't let our sacrifice be for nothing." Riley grabbed my shoulder. "This way, Commander. We need to move now." The next few minutes were a blur of smoke, gunfire, and desperate flight through maintenance tunnels barely wide enough for a single person. Behind us, the sound of battle raged, punctuated by the occasional explosion. I wanted to turn back, to help, but Riley and the others kept pushing me forward. We emerged through a hidden grate in what had once been a parking garage. The morning sun was harsh after the underground darkness, and I had to squint to make out our surroundings. The city above was a hellscape of twisted metal and organic growths, but it was eerily quiet. "The fighting's drawn their attention," Riley explained, leading us through the ruins of what had once been Manhattan. "But it won't last long. Dr. Kim's charges will collapse the tunnel system, but there are other ways down." We moved through the devastated streets for what felt like hours, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Centaurus patrols might spot us. The buildings around us had been transformed into something that looked more grown than built, organic curves and surfaces that pulsed with an unsettling rhythm. "How long have you been fighting them?" I asked Riley during a brief rest in the ruins of a department store. "My whole life. I was born in the tunnels, 23 years ago. Never saw the surface until I was old enough to carry a weapon." She looked around at the devastation. "My parents told me stories about what it was like before. Blue skies, green grass, animals that weren't twisted into unrecognizable shapes." "We're going to get it back," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "That's what Dr. Kim always says. But we've been fighting for 500 years, and all we've done is slow them down." She checked her weapon, a hybrid of human and alien technology. "Maybe you're different. Maybe you really are the guardian from the prophecy." "What exactly does this prophecy say?" Riley recited it like a prayer. "When the stars fall and the earth bleeds, when the children of man cry out in darkness, a guardian will come from the void. He will carry the keys to unlock the sleeping arsenal, and in his hands, the fate of 2 worlds will rest." 2 worlds? Earth and whatever planet the Centaurus came from. The prophecy says the guardian will have to choose which one survives. The implications of that statement were still sinking in when my communicator crackled to life. It was an automated message from my ship's computer, informing me that atmospheric entry would begin in 6 hours. I quickly input new coordinates, a field outside Colorado Springs, and confirmed the landing sequence. "We need to move faster," I told the group. "My ship lands in 6 hours, and we need to be there." Riley nodded and led us out of the ruins. The next few hours were a nightmare of hiding from Centaurus patrols. navigating through contaminated zones where the very air seemed to burn our lungs, and moving through underground passages that had been carved by other resistance groups. We finally reached the outskirts of Colorado Springs as the sun was setting. The city had been transformed just like New York. Twisted spires of organic metal reached toward the sky, and the ground pulsed with that same unsettling rhythm. But in the distance, I could see the mountains where deep iron was hidden. There. Riley pointed to a valley between two peaks. That's where the bunker is supposed to be. But Commander, there's something you need to know. What? We're not the only ones who know about deep iron. Dr. Kim intercepted Centaurus communications 3 months ago. They're looking for it too. The sound of atmospheric entry began as a distant rumble, growing louder as my ship descended through the clouds. The automated systems had worked perfectly, bringing the vessel down in a controlled crash landing that sent up clouds of dust and debris. "There's our ride," I said, but even as I spoke, I could see movement in the distance. Centaurus forces were converging on the landing site. "How many?" Riley asked, raising her weapon. I counted at least 20 of the creatures, their insectoid legs carrying them across the terrain with terrifying speed. Behind them, I could see larger shapes, vehicles or creatures that were too distant to identify clearly. Too many for a frontal assault, I admitted. But we don't need to fight them all. We just need to get to the ship. Riley looked at the 11 other survivors who had made it this far. They were exhausted, running on adrenaline and hope. "What's the plan?" "Distraction. Half of you draw their attention to the east. The other half comes with me to the ship. Once I've got what we need, we regroup and head for deep iron. And if we don't make it?" I looked at the faces around me, people who had never known peace, who had spent their entire lives fighting for survival. "Then we make sure the next group does." Riley nodded grimly. "Dr. Kim was right about you. You really are different." She turned to her team. "You heard the man. Sarah, take 5 and move east. Make noise. Draw their attention. The rest of us go with the commander." The assault began at sunset. The eastern team opened fire on the Centaurus forces, their weapons lighting up the twilight like fireworks. The aliens responded immediately, their own energy weapons creating brilliant flashes as they returned fire. While the battle raged, I led the remaining team toward my ship. The vessel had landed harder than I'd hoped, and smoke was rising from several damaged systems. But the core was intact, and that was all I needed. "Cover me," I told Riley, then sprinted toward the ship's access hatch. The Centaurus had spotted us. Energy bolts seared the air around me as I reached the ship and began the emergency startup sequence. The access codes I needed were in the ship's computer, but it would take time to retrieve them. "Commander," Riley's voice was urgent. "They're flanking us!" I could see them through the ship's porthole, Centaurus warriors moving to surround our position. Their weapons were charging, and in the distance I could see more of them approaching. The computer finally responded. The access codes scrolled across the screen, and I quickly downloaded them to the alien device Elder Calais had given me. But as I did, I noticed something else in the ship's databanks. Classified files that had been sealed since before my mission. The truth about the Centaurus. The truth about why I'd really been sent into space. The truth about what was hidden in deep iron. And the truth about the choice the prophecy said I would have to make. "Got it!" I shouted, grabbing the device and heading for the hatch. But as I stepped outside, I found myself face to face with a Centaurus warrior. It was larger than the others, its compound eyes reflecting the firelight from the battle raging nearby. In its hands was a weapon that hummed with barely contained energy, pointed directly at my chest. For a moment, we stared at each other, human and alien, guardian and conqueror. Then it spoke, its voice a harsh clicking sound that somehow formed words I could understand. "You are the one from the prophecy, the guardian who would come from the stars. How do you know about the prophecy?" "Because we wrote it." The implications hit me like a physical blow. The prophecy wasn't human, it was Centaurus, which meant everything I'd been told, everything I'd believed, was either a lie or part of a plan I couldn't yet understand. "Your people have fought well," the creature continued. "But they do not understand what is coming, neither do you." "Then tell me." The choice approaches. Guardian. And when it comes, you will understand why your species was chosen, why you were sent into the void, why you have returned. Energy bolts suddenly filled the air around us as Riley and her team opened fire. The Centaurus warrior spun away, its weapon discharging harmlessly into the ground. In the confusion, I ran toward the mountains where Deep Iron waited. Behind me, the battle continued. Ahead lay the answers I'd been seeking since I'd awakened in this nightmare world. But now I wasn't sure I wanted to know what those answers would reveal. The alien device in my hands pulsed with warm light, responding to the authorization codes from my ship. Whatever was hidden in Deep Iron, I was about to find out. And somewhere in the back of my mind, the Centaurus warrior's words echoed. Your species was chosen. Chosen for what? And by whom? The mountains loomed ahead, dark and forbidding. But they held the key to everything. The weapons that could free humanity, the truth about the Centaurus, and the choice that would determine the fate of two worlds. I was no longer just a guardian. I was a pawn in a game that had been playing out for centuries, and the next move was mine. The mountain path to Deep Iron was treacherous, carved into rock faces that had been weathered by 5 centuries of acid rain and alien atmospheric processors. The very air seemed to burn our lungs with each breath, thick with metallic particles that the Centaurus extraction machines had been spewing into the atmosphere for centuries. Riley and the 7 survivors who had made it through the ship assault moved like ghosts through the darkness, their modified weapons ready for the Centaurus patrols we knew were hunting us. The landscape around us was a testament to the aliens' complete disregard for life. Trees that had once stood proud were now twisted metal sculptures, their bark replaced by some kind of conductive material that pulsed with alien energy. The ground beneath our feet felt wrong, too soft in some places, too hard in others, as if the very earth was being slowly transformed into something alien. Through the twisted landscape, I could see them, Centaurus patrol units moving with mechanical precision through the ruins of what had once been a hiking trail. Their 4 legs clicked against the corrupted stone with rhythmic precision, while their humanoid torsos swiveled constantly, scanning for threats. They're not just patrolling, Riley observed, studying their movement patterns. They're searching for something specific. Us, I realized. They know we're here. There, Riley whispered, pointing to what looked like a natural rock formation ahead. The entrance should be behind those boulders. I pulled out the alien device, now fully integrated with my ship's authorization codes. The moment I approached the rock face, hidden sensors activated with a sound like whispers in the wind. A section of the mountain slid away with a mechanical hum that had been silent for 500 years, revealing a corridor lined with pristine metal walls. The contrast was jarring. Outside, everything was corruption and decay, but inside Deep Iron, it was as if time had stopped. The air was clean and cool, processed by systems that had been running autonomously for centuries. Emergency lighting activated, a synthetic voice announced. Welcome to Deep Iron Military Installation. Please state your authorization level. Commander Tony Kendrick, United Earth Defense Force. Authorization level Alpha 77 Omega. Authorization confirmed. Commander Kendrick, you are 187,432 days overdue for your scheduled briefing. Riley stared at me in amazement. 500 years, and it's still waiting for you. We entered the facility, and emergency lighting guided us through corridors that looked like they had been sealed yesterday. The walls were covered in motivational posters from my era, but someone had been maintaining this place. The work was precise, mechanical, clearly done by automated systems. The first chamber we entered was vast, filled with vehicles I didn't recognize. Sleek, angular machines designed for urban warfare. Their surfaces were covered in adaptive camouflage that responded to our presence, shifting colors and patterns. But it was the smell that hit me first. Ozone and metal and something organic. The vehicles weren't just machines. They were hybrid constructs, part mechanical, part biological. Autonomous combat units, the computer explained. Designed for anti-alien occupation operations. Current inventory, 427 units, all fully operational. biological components integrated from captured alien specimens. They've been experimenting on them, I realized, for 500 years. Riley approached one of the vehicles. All our desperate scavenging, and there was an army waiting under the mountain. Anti-alien? Riley asked. The invasion was anticipated, I realized, the pieces finally falling into place. They knew the Centaurus were coming. The next chamber revealed walls lined with weapons that hummed with contained energy, ammunition that seemed to bend light around it, and armor that moved like liquid metal. But it was the specimen tanks that made my blood run cold. Dozens of them, containing pieces of Centaurus anatomy, all carefully studied. They've been dissecting them, Riley said. Learning how they work, how to kill them. The central display showed the positions of dead worlds throughout the galaxy. The Centaurus didn't just kill randomly. They followed specific routes, harvesting worlds in a precise sequence that maximized their energy extraction. They're not just invaders, I said. They're farmers, industrial farmers on a galactic scale. The display showed Earth's position in the sequence, not the first world they'd targeted, not the last, but somewhere in the middle of a campaign that had been going on for millennia. Current extraction rate, 47% of planetary core mass, the computer reported. Projected completion, 543 days. 18 months, Riley translated. Then Earth becomes another dead rock in space. Current harvesting queue contains 114 targeted worlds. Estimated completion time, 47,000 years. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of civilizations, billions of lives, all scheduled for systematic extermination. Computer, explain core extraction protocol, Riley demanded. Classified information. Commander Kendrick, please proceed to the central command chamber for full briefing. The command chamber was a cathedral of technology. Screens covering every wall, displaying data streams that had been collecting information for 5 centuries. The holographic figure that materialized was so realistic, I could have sworn it was living. The uniform was Earth Defense Force, but the face was familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. It was mine, but older, weathered by terrible knowledge. Commander Kendrick, the hologram said, and I recognized the voice immediately. It was mine, but older, carrying the weight of impossible decisions. What is this? I demanded. I am General Kendrick, recorded message protocol 77 Omega. If you are seeing this, then the Centaurus have completed their occupation of Earth, and you have successfully returned from the void. Riley grabbed my arm. That's you. That's impossible. Time dilation, I realized. The mission briefing mentioned it as a possibility. The mission was never about deflecting an asteroid, my older self continued. 3 days before launch, our deep space sensors confirmed what we had suspected. XK-739 was an alien vessel, but the launch proceeded anyway. The words hit me like physical blows. They knew. They knew we were flying into a trap. Not a trap. A calculated sacrifice. The time dilation was engineered as your ship was equipped with experimental gravity manipulation technology, designed to create a temporal displacement upon contact with alien technology. The walls lit up with displays showing dead worlds, their cores extracted, their surfaces barren. You were meant to return exactly when humanity needed you most, when the Resistance had identified the strongest survivors, when the Centaurus had committed fully to Earth's consumption. How many astronauts did they sacrifice? I asked. 17 missions, 43 astronauts. You are the only one who returned at the correct time. The others were reassigned. Murdered, Riley said flatly. Sacrificed, just as you were sacrificed. Just as humanity itself has been sacrificed on the altar of survival. Command knew we were sending astronauts to their deaths, I said, the betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. Not to their deaths, the hologram corrected. To their destiny. The time dilation was calculated. You were meant to return exactly when humanity needed you most. When the Resistance had identified the strongest survivors. When the Centaurus had committed fully to Earth's consumption. The displays changed, showing real-time data from across the globe. The twisted spires I'd seen weren't just alien architecture. They were extraction nodes, massive machines boring deep into the Earth's core. The planet's magnetic field was already destabilizing, and seismic activity was increasing exponentially. "How long do we have?" Riley asked. 18 months, the hologram replied. "Then Earth becomes another dead rock in space. And they'll move on to the next planet," I realized. "How many worlds have they consumed?" Current count: 473 confirmed dead worlds. The Centaurus are not conquerors. They are harvesters. They have no interest in communication, negotiation, or coexistence. Humanity is simply an obstacle to be eliminated. The weight of it was crushing. Millions of civilizations, billions of lives, all reduced to fuel for the Centaurus war machine. And Earth was next on their list. "But there is a way to stop them," the hologram continued. "The satellite network." New displays activated, showing the orbital infrastructure that still surrounded Earth. Hundreds of military satellites, their weapons cold and dark, but their systems intact. The Centaurus had ignored them, perhaps considering them too primitive to be a threat. "The satellites can be weaponized," I said, understanding the plan. "More than weaponized. They can be turned into kinetic projectiles. The orbital mechanics are already calculated. Simultaneous impact with the mothership's core systems will cause a cascade failure." "What about the smaller ships?" "Some will escape, but without the mothership's core processors, they cannot continue the extraction. They will be forced to find another world to consume, buying time for other civilizations to prepare." Riley was studying the tactical displays. "How do we control the satellites?" "The Centaurus must have orbital defenses. The control systems are hardened against alien interference, but they require manual activation from this facility." The hologram gestured to the central console. "Commander, the choice is yours. You can activate the network and strike the first blow in a war that will span the galaxy." I approached the console, my hands trembling. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, not just for Earth, but for every world the Centaurus would consume if they weren't stopped here. "There's something else," the hologram continued. "The Centaurus mothership contains the accumulated knowledge of every civilization they've destroyed. Libraries, art, scientific discoveries, everything that was lost when those worlds died. Destroying it means that knowledge dies with them. And if we don't destroy it, everyone dies anyway," Riley said grimly. The activation sequence was complex, requiring multiple authorization codes and biometric confirmations. As I worked, I could feel the weight of 473 dead worlds pressing down on me. How many beings had faced this same choice? How many had failed? "Final authorization required," the computer announced. "Warning, activation will result in irreversible consequences." "I know," I said, placing my hand on the scanner. The facility came alive around us. Power surged through systems that had been dormant for centuries, and the screens filled with targeting data as the satellites began their final maneuvers. Above us, I could imagine the Centaurus finally realizing what was happening, but it was too late. "Satellite network online," the computer announced. "All units in position. Firing solution confirmed." Through the facility's sensors, I could see the mothership in orbit, a massive structure that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Its surface was covered in extraction equipment and processing centers, all dedicated to the systematic murder of worlds. "Execute," I said. The results were immediate and spectacular. Hundreds of satellites broke from their orbits simultaneously, their trajectories calculated to impact the mothership's critical systems within seconds of each other. The alien vessel's defenses activated, energy weapons lashing out to destroy the incoming projectiles. But there were too many, coming from too many directions. The first impacts sent shockwaves through the mothership's hull. Secondary explosions followed as the satellite strikes triggered cascade failures in the alien systems. Through the facility's sensors, I watched 5 centuries of human suffering being answered with cold, precise violence. "Multiple hull breaches detected," the computer reported. "Mothership core systems failing." But the Centaurus weren't finished. Smaller vessels began launching from the dying mothership, their pilots desperate to escape the destruction. Some were caught in the expanding debris field, but others managed to break free, disappearing into the void. "Mothership destroyed," the computer announced. "Threat level reduced to minimal." The screens around us showed the aftermath. a debris field where the mothership had been, and the scattered remnants of the Centaurus fleet fleeing into deep space. But I felt no satisfaction, only a grim understanding of what this meant. "They'll be back," Riley said, voicing what we were all thinking. "Maybe," I agreed. "But not here. Not now. And other worlds will have time to prepare." The hologram flickered one final time. "Commander, the immediate threat is neutralized, but the extraction nodes are still active. They'll continue boring into the Earth's core until they're physically destroyed." "Then we destroy them," I said. "All of them." The battle for Earth's surface took 6 months. Using the weapons and vehicles from deep iron, the scattered resistance cells finally had the tools they needed to strike back. The Centaurus ground forces, cut off from their mothership and facing an enemy that no longer had to hide, were systematically eliminated. But the extraction nodes were the real challenge. Each one was a fortress, defended by automated systems and powered by the planet's own core. The fights were brutal, desperate affairs where every victory came at a terrible cost. I led the assault on the Central Park node, the twisted spire that had been the first alien structure I'd seen upon my return. The battle lasted 3 days, with waves of automated defenders pouring from the structure's depths. But in the end, human determination and alien technology proved unstoppable. The node's destruction sent shockwaves through the surrounding area. The organic growths that had covered the city began to wither and die, and for the first time in 5 centuries, clean rain fell on Manhattan. "It's over," Riley said, standing beside me in the ruins of what had once been Times Square. Around us, other survivors were emerging from hiding, their faces turned toward a sky that was slowly clearing. "This part is," I corrected. "But somewhere out there, the Centaurus are regrouping. They'll find another world to consume, and eventually, they'll return with a larger fleet." "Let them come," she said, raising her weapon, a hybrid of human engineering and alien technology. "We know how to fight them now." The rebuilding took years, but humanity had something it hadn't possessed in 5 centuries: hope. The technology recovered from deep iron and salvaged from the Centaurus installations gave us tools we'd never imagined. We began reaching out to other worlds, sharing our knowledge, and preparing for the day when the harvesters would return. And they would return. The scattered ships that had escaped carried the knowledge of our victory, and the Centaurus would adapt. The next invasion would be larger, more prepared, more ruthless. But so would we. Standing in the rebuilt city, watching ships launch toward the stars carrying warnings and weapons to other worlds, I finally understood my true purpose. I wasn't just a guardian of Earth. I was humanity's gift to the galaxy, a symbol of what was possible when a species refused to quietly accept extinction. The war was far from over. But for the first time in the universe's history, the Centaurus had been defeated. And that victory would echo across the stars, inspiring other species to stand and fight. The harvesters had made a critical error. They had assumed that all species would fall as easily as the first 473. They were wrong. And somewhere in the depths of space, fleeing toward their next target, the surviving Centaurus were learning what it meant to be afraid of the dark.